Hey there, I am back with another deck review, and today we're going to be looking at Tigers V2 from King's Wild Project and designer Jackson Robinson. Now, this deck is a follow-up to one of Jackson's most popular series ever. Back in 2018, he did a Kickstarter for the original Tigers decks. They remain incredibly popular to this day, and in fact he's produced a few gilded versions and things like that, but this is the first major redesign of the Tigers deck that he's done. So I was incredibly excited to pick this one up to add to my Tigers collection. I actually have the previous two Tigers decks from the original campaign. You have the standard version here, as well as one that remains one of the best decks in my collection, the limited edition version. This one came in this phenomenal matchbook style box. You can see my full review for this one on my channel if you want, but these two decks were the ones that were released with the original campaign and were redesigned with the V2. So we'll talk about this deck, we'll talk about the inspiration, the story behind it, why I love this deck so much, and talk about some of the differences with the original two decks. Now, starting out with the inspiration, this is really what drew me to this more than anything. Tigers is originally inspired artistically by a fascination that Jackson had with matchbook art of the 1800s and into the early 1900s. Matchbooks used to have beautiful artwork drawn on them, and he kind of got this fascination for the artwork that was drawn on something that was really just meant to be thrown away. So he did a celebration of that, but he also combined that with another really interesting inspiration. So back in the 1800s, about 1881, the Russell and Morgan Company, which would later become the United States Playing Card Company, they designed their very first deck of cards, the number 101 Tigers. And this deck draws a lot of design elements from that original deck that really launched the Russell and Morgan Company. So really interesting combination in taking the matchbook art with the original number 101 Tigers deck from Russell and Morgan to produce this phenomenal beauty right here. So let's jump into it without any further ado, find out what we're taking a look at. All right, starting with the tuck case. Definitely you'll see right off a lot of similarities to the original standard edition tuck. And it's designed to look like some of that beautiful, vivid artwork you might find on a matchbook. You've got the Tigers brand written really boldly across the top, a snarling tiger featured big, bold front and center. All of these elements are kind of bigger and pop even more than the original deck. You've got high quality playing cards and then King's Wild Project underneath, and then this beautiful, bright color scheme all around it. Unlike the original tuck that kind of had these greens and pinks and oranges, this one's done in a little bit more of an Americana flair to it. Kind of has almost a red, white, and blue look to it. Very cool, a lot brighter and bolder than the original as well. On the sides, it just says King's Wild Tigers, big bold letters. Other side, same thing. You have some ad copy for Jackson Robinson, King's Wild Project on the bottom, as well as one of his trademarks, the mention of 1 Thessalonians 4:11, his signature Bible verse. The top says King's Wild Project again, and the back has a preview of the back design of the cards. Look more at that in a second. The whole thing is given this really cool aged look to it, almost like there's cracks and weathering all around the tuck case. Really kind of lends itself to that vintage feel all around. Tuck isn't embossed or foiled in any way, but I think that really fits well. It's sealed with this white postage stamp style seal. This is meant to look a lot like the original tack seals that you could find on the Tigers deck from way back in the day. So nice little nod to history again there. As you open up the inner flap, have a little saying here, strike once, strike true. Very fitting for a matchbook. And number 13, which you'll find on pretty much any Jackson Robinson deck, written on those inner flaps. The inner printing on this one is really striking as well. You have this red, white, and blue design, very patriotic looking. The big banner down the center that just says King's Wild Tigers and that red and white striping. Very cool, bold looking. Nice little surprise when you open up the tuck case. So that's the tuck case, but let's get into the cards, and we'll start with the back design. And this back design is very similar to the back design from the standard deck originally. And here's what that one looks like. So very much the same. You'll see some of the colors are swapped out. They're a good bit bolder and brighter compared to the original, but very much in keeping with the design. Now, it's done again in kind of an Americana-esque color scheme. Definitely some red, white, and blue there, but you also have some oranges and yellows popping, a little bit of green on the banners here. The main design element is this sort of casino style images of the snarling tiger and this two-way back design. Really bright and interesting looking. And then lots of borders and extras all around. You got the banners curling up there. Finishes out in this nice blue border and then a thin, I won't call it a white poker border because it does have a little bit of natural looking aging to it, but a thin kind of beige poker border around the edge. I, again, just like the tuck case, love the weathering that's done on this one to give it that sort of aged look. Now getting into the cards. And here's your two jokers. Another nod to the original Tigers deck. These both feature an image that you'll find from the original deck, and it's this circular image with the snarling tiger inside, and then the smaller circles surrounding him with the four suits. Really beautiful design, and one that was featured in some of the original Jackson Robinson Tigers decks as well. I like the ad here, this little stamp, something you'd see on a lot of tucks. I believe that was used kind of as a tax stamp, so just to signify, kind of like the seal on the outside, a stamp on one of the cards to signify that the appropriate taxes have been paid. And so in this case, though, it's a King's Wild emblem style seal. So very nice. That, again, parchment aged background, nice little splotches to give you a little bit of weathering and aging. The other two cards feature, as the first one of my favorite extra cards in any deck, and that's this matches card. Very fitting with it being for a box of matches. Allows you to kind of get that effect as you pull it out of the tuck case, almost like you're pulling matches out of a tuck box or out of a matchbook. So very cool effect with those. I love the addition of this card, one of my favorites. And then you have kind of an ad card, if you will, but this one features 1 Thessalonians 4:11 in its entirety, so you can see Jackson's signature verse there. All right, so that is the extra cards, but now into the deck, and we'll start with the aces. The ace of spades, definitely the power ace of this one. This is the same ace that was featured on the limited version of the deck, and it's a really striking one. You have a pretty plain spade pip there in the center, but tons of banners surrounding it with the name of the deck or some copy for Jackson Robinson and Crafting the USA. And then surrounding it, you have these prowling tigers. Very cool look to them. You can see them kind of staring each other down across the ground of that spade and giving them that sort of menacing look. But very cool. The crossing banners forming the background. Just a really cool look to this one overall. Nice, small, but easy to read nonetheless, pip and index in the corner. The other three aces, definitely not as prominent as the ace of spades, but they do feature nice large pips with some extra ornamentation. I like the ace of diamonds across the top, and then each one has its own kind of motto. So you've got stay sharp on the ace of diamonds, strike true on the ace of clubs, and shoot straight on the ace of hearts. Nice touch on those. All right, so there are your aces. The number cards are honestly nothing too out of the ordinary. I'll call your attention to a few details, but it's on this nice weathered background. Features fairly standard pips in the center. Nothing too special. Black pips. You do get that beautiful weathering, and one of the nice touches that Jackson added on this one that I wish more weathered looking decks added is, notice as I go through these, the weathering pattern on the background is completely distinct from one card to the next. Not only that, but as you look at the pips really closely, the weathering on the pips themselves changes from pip to pip and from card to card. So you won't get any of that sort of nagging repetition as you look at the pips. You're like, I feel like I've seen that pip before. I love the attention to detail and adding that on here. Other than those kind of extra little fun with the weathering, these are pretty much standard pips all the way through. Nothing too special to say on these. Big, bold, kind of fatter pips, but not too much else to say otherwise. So there are your number cards. And so finally we get into the courts. And this is really where the biggest change from the original decks comes. So before I get into these courts, let's talk for a second about the courts from the original decks. So over here on the left, we have the courts from the standard, and over here we have the courts from the limited from the original campaign. On the standard, it was a pretty classic, definitely redrawn in Jackson style, but a classically styled court. Two-way court, has the classic face that we all know and love from bicycle decks, definitely familiar and recognizable. With the courts in the limited though, he did something really cool. He added the tiger courts. Now the poses that you see here are reminiscent of the poses from the one-way courts that were featured in the original Russell and Morgan deck, but he swapped out the faces for tigers, obviously in keeping with the name of the deck. These courts I absolutely love. They're really beautifully done, beautifully drawn. But with these two courts, one of the big requests that Jackson got when people were thinking about the deck was he wanted that people wanted to have the style of the two-way court and this layout, but with the face of the tiger. And so with the new deck, Jackson decided to oblige. And that's what we get here. So here's the marriage of the two styles. You have that beautiful two-way court, but now the heads have been swapped out with tiger faces. And the same continues on all of the courts as we go through. These are the same faces from the limited deck originally, and then the same body and clothing from the standard deck. I love the marriage. I think it's a great twist to add to the overall line. Really glad he did it. Personally, my favorite of the three still remains the limited from the original, but these are great to add in. So there's all of your courts as you go through. I love the look of the tigers on these, the different facial expressions that they've got. Here's probably my favorite one, the King of Hearts, the Suicidal King, with that really beautiful growl on his face as he looks right into your eyes. So love the look of these. Great job on the courts. So that's it. That is the deck. As far as handling, these are printed by the USPCC, so they handle really nicely. They fan beautifully. They cuts everything, all very easy to use in that front. Unlike some USPCC decks, no centering issues for me at least. Don't know if that's the case with all the decks, but certainly I didn't have any problems with that. So really beautiful deck overall. So what is the deck for? Well, for me, I think, this is a deck that I think would be a blast to use for gameplay. Maybe Magic, maybe a little bit too custom for Magic, but I think would make a great deck for gameplay and really kind of spice things up with something different. But more than anything, just like the other Tigers decks, this is just a great one to have as a collector. The tie-in to the history, the artwork with the tigers and the matchbook covers, it just all comes together in a beautiful package. As much as I love the original decks, I am incredibly glad to add this one to the collection. So that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed this look at the Tigers deck. These are still available on King's Wild Project. If you like what you see here, I highly recommend going to check it out for yourself, especially if you don't have any of the other Tigers decks in your collection. So thanks for watching this review. Let me know what else you want to see. Make sure to subscribe for more deck reviews and unboxings, and I'll see you for the next one.